Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Seeds and Weeds podcast, brought to you by Small House Farm. Are you a gardener, an herbalist, a forager, or maybe you're just a little plant curious? Well, you've come to the right place. This is Seeds and Weeds. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the show. This is a very exciting time of year for us here at Small House Farm. It is the time of year that we get to plan and start planting the seeds for our garden. Every part of the garden season is exciting, but this is like maybe the most exciting because the sky's the limit right now. You know, we can just kind of let our imagination run wild and really dream of all of these awesome gardens. So we got Heather back in the studio. Hey, Heather.
Hey.
And we are going to be breaking down our garden planning into 3 simple steps. If we take any big chore or task or activity and break it down into smaller parts, it's easier to handle. So we're doing that with the garden. So we got the 3 steps to planning the garden of your dreams.
That sounds nice.
It does sound nice. So the first step, of course, is identifying your space. Now, if you're new to gardening, if you're starting your first garden, this is, very important. Obviously, you have to identify your space before you can plant anything. But even if you have an established garden, identifying your space is important. Like, how much are you going to plant this year?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is you couldn't just walk out there right now in February and analyze where the sun's going to be at, right? Because the sun's going to be different now than it will be when your garden's actually blooming in June through August.
Sure, the sun will be in a different position in the sky. There's going to be leaves on the trees. It'll be definitely different out there. But we can estimate some of this, even though the sun's a little bit different this time of year, we can say, well, this is obviously going to be full sun because there's nothing around to block it, or this is likely to be partial shade because there's going to be trees here. So we can make some rough estimates out there and make a plan for it. And that's why I think that taking good notes, having a garden notebook and writing things down throughout the year is so valuable, because then you can come back to these ideas and revisit these mistakes perhaps and do better.
And you always think, I'm going to remember what I planted in this bed and I'll change it for next year. And then you cannot remember.
No.
And we write things down and still cannot remember. It's nice to reference them back later.
I like to act cool and think I'm going to remember everything out there, but there's no way. No. Especially as the gardens grow. And there's been so many seasons out there for sure. So anyways, we got to identify our space. We got to analyze our sunshine. That's the first thing that we like to do. I like to diagram it out. Honestly, I like to draw it. I'm a visual person, so that helps me. But you can make a list if you're into lists, or however you like to do that. And then we're going to determine here, of course, if we're going to be growing in the ground or in containers, or if you've got an established garden, if you're going to increase your ground space or start growing in more containers, because there's some differences here. If you've got a new garden, if you're establishing a new garden in the ground, now we might have to be flipping sod, tilling things over for the first time, whatever it might be. Or if you have an established in-ground garden already, I'm going to suggest a soil test. Again, possibly something we should have done in the fall, but as soon as the snow melts and we have access to that soil in the spring, we got plenty of time still to do it. But we're going to want to do a soil test so we can see if the garden beds need anything, any sort of amendments to get them ready to go for planting season. Conversely, if we're growing in containers, we're going to need to figure out, what kind of soil are we putting in these containers? We got to source the soil. Are we going to blend our own? Are we buying potting mix? And here at Small House, we do both. We've got stuff in the ground. We got stuff in raised beds. We got stuff in containers. So we kind of have to plan all 3 of these things.
It's a fun thing to do in the middle of winter, sit and draw it out, draw your gardens in your house and how it all relates to one another, and to dream of that. So I do find that to be a fun task during these winter months.
Absolutely. Getting the seed catalogs out and really getting into it. So once we got the seed catalogs out, now it's time to start making our list of wants, right? We got to start thinking about, what do we want to grow? We've identified the space. We understand what needs to be done there. What's going in the space? So in the second half of our show today, we're actually going to share with you all of the seeds that we are sourcing this year for our garden. We got a really fun project that we're working on that requires some very specific things to be grown in the garden. So we've been having a lot of fun with that. We're going to get into that later, but let's talk about that seed supply.
All right. So really the first thing you need to do is go through your own personal seed supply. What do you already have on hand? Do you already have your beans and tomatoes and peppers? Or do you need to purchase new spinach seeds or new lettuce seeds? So go through that supply, possibly germination test, the ones that you might question there.
Well, sure. So these are going to be seeds that you've possibly saved from your own garden, which is super cool. Or maybe seeds that you picked up from like a local seed swap or something like that. So these are seeds that are already in the stash. You mentioned spinach and such. So seeds like spinach spinach, parsnips, some of your alliums. Those seeds don't store very long, right? So we're going to want to, hopefully we've been labeling our seeds properly so they got dates on them and things. And we want, if these are older seeds, a germ test is very important, so you want it before the garden season's happening. You don't want to find out you got a bunch of duds. So doing a germination test in the winter is really awesome. We're going to do a little tutorial video on how to do that. We're going to have it over on our Patreon page, so you can go and check that out, watch a little video on how to do a little germ test right at home. No problem. So now that we've gone through all of our seeds in our stash, we got a pretty good list of stuff, especially like you mentioned, our tomatoes and our peppers and that sort of thing. We got plenty of seeds to get us through for sure. But there are some seeds that we're going to need. And when you go through your stash, there might be seeds that you're going to need too. So we got to get our order list together and figure out what we're going, where we're going to source the seeds from. There are so many great seed companies out there.
It's almost overwhelming.
Almost overwhelming. In one of the first episodes of the podcast that we did, first season, one of the first 3 episodes, I can't remember which one it was, but we did our top 10 favorite seed companies. I mean, that was a hard list to put together, but that was cool. So, I'll put a link to that actually in the show notes so folks can check that out if they want to see that. But despite what my favorite seed companies are, you've probably got your own list at home, or when you can, try to shop something local. A local regional seed company is going to have seeds that are adapted to your region. So shop there first. But if they don't have the variety that you're looking for, you can expand on that and, shop all around. We shop from, a handful of seed companies every year just because, we want to grow different stuff and everybody kind of specializes in different things.
Definitely. But the closer that seed has been grown to my microclimate, especially, being in the Midwest, the northern Midwest, we need to make sure that the seed's going to be adapted to this colder, shorter season. So sourcing the seeds from somebody close to us is that much more important.
Once we've got our seed supply figured out, we know where our seeds are coming from, then we are moving on to the third step of planning the perfect garden, which is making a schedule. And for me, this is the most challenging part. I think, it's easy to diagram the garden. That's exciting and fun. It's easy to shop for seeds. I mean, it's too easy to shop for seeds sometimes. But making the schedule, that's tricky because now we got to sit down with all the different varieties, all the different species that we picked. We got to sit down with the calendar. We got to understand our frost dates in the region that we're at. And we kind of have to lay out when are these seeds hitting the soil, which ones are getting planted indoors, which ones are going outside, when do we transplant them out? There's a lot of steps here. And it can sound complicated when I'm just rattling through it right here. But once we kind of break this down a little bit, just like anything else, it's actually pretty easy to do once we have a grip on what we're doing. I'm going to give you some examples. So things like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, these are all longer season, heat-loving crops, right? And in Michigan, I don't have a long enough of a season to just direct sow these things and have them produce for me. So I have to start those indoors, maybe 6 weeks. People will say 6 to 8 weeks. 8 weeks in particular if you're going like hot peppers. The super hots take a lot longer to germinate and get going. 6 to 8 weeks for peppers and eggplants, 4 to 6 weeks for tomatoes. And how we're figuring this out, I mean, it says it on the back of a commercial seed packet. You can look there. But what you want to understand is how long does this plant need to become a well-established young plant before I can put it out into the ground? Conversely, if we're growing shorter season, cool weather crops. Now, the examples here could be things like broccolis and cabbages and greens, like mustard greens and that sort of thing, collards, whatever it might be. We're starting those almost the exact same time. When we're starting our tomatoes and peppers, we're also starting some of those cold season crops, but they can go out into the garden a lot sooner. Right. So this is part of the garden schedule that we got to figure out. So first, when are we dropping seeds in the soil to begin with? When are we transplanting them out?
A cool tip would be to do a quick Google search and look up just a blank calendar and print a couple of the next months in blank calendars. And we do this all the time for our social media planning and our financial planning, all sorts of random things. But great way to get like a calendar. You can just print it out. There it is. Write it all down.
And you don't have to be perfect with it. If I write, okay, on this Thursday, it's transplanting day, but the weather's not right that day or something comes up. I mean, you got a window here. You got to leave a few days on either side. When you're transplanting your plants out anyways, you want to kind of wait for a shady day. You don't want a full sun blasting these little babies. So, waiting for the right day is perfect, but it'll give us a nice guide to help keep us on task while we're doing it. Some of our seeds are going to be direct sown, right? We could think about things like corn and beans and some of our melons, cucumbers. We're planting those right into the soil. I got to make sure that the soil is ready for those plants to go in, right? I mean, ready, of course, with the amendments, but I mean the temperature of the soil, right? We got to make sure that that soil has warmed up to the proper temperature. Things like, beans, you should not be planting those types of warm weather crops in the soil to this 55, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The soil, down in the soil, not the surface. Get a thermometer and check that soil temp. Very important to make sure that everything's ready so these plants and these seeds can go in there and be happy. That's why that time of year gets so busy at the beginning of June, because the soil's finally warmed up. So now we're direct sowing a bunch of crops. We're also transplanting a bunch of our warm weather crops. All kind of happens in the same week. Very busy time. It's awesome.
Oh, it sounds so fun.
I know. I can't wait.
I can't wait.
Once we've got our schedule in place, we got a good grip on what we're doing, it is time to start gathering the equipment. Starting our seeds indoors is actually quite simple to do, but it does require a little bit of special equipment that we're going to have to get together. Now, we actually just posted a pretty cool video over on our YouTube. It's a seed starting tips and tricks type of video. Lots of cool information in there to help you succeed with your seed starting adventures. Once we gather up the equipment in this list, then, these two things combined, the video and this list of equipment, it's basically everything that you're going to need to get growing. So, of course, I guess the first thing that we're going to need is a shelf. We need a place, a table or a shelf or something to put these baby seeds on while we get them planted. We've got a couple different shelves that we've used throughout the years. One of them is large enough to fit 2 trays of seedlings on each shelf, and then we've got a smaller one that just fits 1. So again, it depends on how many seeds you're starting, how much space you're going to need. That's how you're going to choose the type of shelf. Pretty basic.
But after some experimentation with different shelves, we have realized that the metal kitchen style shelves, commercial metal shelves, work really well, because then the next thing that you need is lights. And to hang those lights, you can easily use little S-hooks and chains on those metal shelves.
Yeah, that works really well. So we're going to want to take that into consideration when we're choosing our shelf, is what kind of lighting system we're going to use here. So the shelf style, like you just described with the metal kitchen, commercial kitchen style, works really well for hanging lights on. So that's very, very important, because these plants are going to need lights to get started. Some seeds require light in order to germinate, so that's important, but all baby plants are going to need some good lighting so they can get going and be healthy, happy plants. You don't want leggy plants. You don't want stretched out, sad plants. Happy plants, keep a light close to them. What kind of light are you going to use here? Some people are going to go out and they're going to get some really nice high pressure sodium grow lights. You could do that. If you're growing plants indoors throughout the whole year, that's probably more important. But just for getting our seeds started, we don't need something so hardcore. You can go use any sort of shop light. You go to the hardware store where they're selling shop lights, and you can find lights. They're labeled daylight spectrum. Sometimes they say plants. Sometimes they'll say aquarium. And they're relatively inexpensive. I can't quote a price for something because the price of stuff goes up every 20 minutes. So who knows? So get some lights, hang them up, keep them close to the plant. We want these lights just a couple of inches off of the soil and a couple of inches off the plants as they grow. So as the plants grow taller, move the lights up. And that's why Heather's system with the chains and the S-hooks is so nice, because it's very easy to adjust the height of these lights. It's very user-friendly. It's something that she's put together over years of trial and error. Once we're getting our seeds planted, there's probably going to be pictures of it on our Instagram or something like that. So you could easily check that out if you want to get a visual on that. Now, once we've got our shelves, we got our lights. In some situations, we're going to need some heat mats, Heather.
Yeah, heat mats. So I do like the single tray size heat mats, and you really need them for your hot weather crops like...
Well, we're talking peppers, we're talking your tomatoes, eggplants, the ones that I mentioned earlier that are crops that need to be started indoors because they need a long, warm season. Those are the ones that need the heat mats too. That's really going to help speed up that germination. They need that warmth, so that's how the seed knows that it's safe for them to break dormancy and to start to grow. Once those plants have started to grow, though, they're not quite as sensitive to those needs for heat. So you can actually remove that heat mat and use it for other seeds. So of course, the next thing we're going to need is some containers to get our seeds started in. I really like the trays that you can get, the black trays with the cells. It's got that clear plastic dome lid. I really like those. That clear dome lid, that's your friend here because it creates a little greenhouse effect. It helps hold the moisture in around these seeds. And that's very important because our seed starting medium, which we'll get to here in a second, doesn't really retain moisture very well on its own. So having this little greenhouse, it keeps the heat around the seeds, keeps the moisture around the seeds, and it really helps them get going. But some folks actually prefer to use like a soil blocker. So that's pretty cool. You'll have to get a soil blocking tool in order to do that, but that's a fantastic option.
But you don't need to be so fancy about it. You can use some egg cartons and recycle those into a seed tray. You can use milk jugs laying around. You could use any sort of, what are those cups, those that you play ping pong with? No.
Oh, yeah, the solo cups?
Yeah, solo cups.
I've never played ping pong with the solo cup, but I think I know what you're referring to. Yeah, absolutely. You can repurpose all sorts of stuff. I don't know if you mentioned this, but I've seen people make little potting things out of newspaper, folding newspaper up, and then they could just plant that right into the soil.
Yeah, depending on how many seeds you're actually starting, you don't need to be so intense about it. So whatever you have around, whatever works, that's one of the benefits of living the homesteading lifestyle is reusing, repurposing, being creative.
Absolutely. Use what you've got. Don't go buy new stuff. Use what you've got. Repurpose it. Yeah, that's totally cool. I love that.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about the growing medium. The seed starting soil mixes that they often sell at the stores are going to be a blend of peat moss, there's coconut coir. The reason that folks choose these types of seed starting mixes is because of the consistency of the soil. And that's really the most important thing here is it's light and airy. It's really easy for these young seeds to push their way through to get out, of course, if we think about in nature, these plants are just pushing right through the earth and it's no big deal and they're totally fine. And if you're growing native plants and that sort of thing, it's definitely less of an issue. But when we're talking about a lot of these domesticated, cultivated food crops that have been altered from their wild state through hundreds of years of domestication, sometimes they're they need a little more coaxing. They need a little more coddling to get through. So these seed starting mixes are really nice for them to do that. Like I mentioned, though, they don't hold a lot of moisture. So that dome, again, is very important around these seeds. And then once those seeds start to sprout, you're going to take that dome off anyway so they can get airflow. And then it's critical that we pay attention to watering this mix.
So that means that, if you were using an egg carton or you were using some sort of alternative seed container, that you then also need like a tray, like a baking tray or a cake pan or something that you pour the water into the cake pan as the solo cups sit in the baking pan. So that it needs to be able to soak up from the bottom.
Well, this is an important thing to note then. If we're going to be using solo cups or egg cartons or anything like that, you got to poke holes in the bottom of them.
Ooh, poking holes.
You have to, because you need the drainage for the soil to be able to drain so those seeds aren't just sitting in all that wet. But also for what we're talking about here, they need a way to be able to pull the water up from below. So those drainage holes, you have to have that. I've never actually grown seeds in an egg carton before, but I can't imagine trying to do it without poking holes in it.
I think we're going to try it and talk about it on the Patreon.
Okay, cool. That sounds like fun.
This year, we're going to try something new and try this self-watering system. We're going to make timed self-watering system that waters from the bottom.
So that's going to be a new experiment for us. So it's like always an adventure. The garden never gets stale. There's always like some new thing to try, some new plant to grow, some new technique to try to master. It's fun to try new things, but also in this case, it's going to be really convenient if we can pull it off, is to have an automated water system.
Now all we need is some seeds.
So this year we have a super top secret project in the works that is requiring us to purchase more seeds than we normally would of a lot of different species and varieties. Of an incredible amount of diversity is planned for this next garden here in 2025. So we have put together an interesting list. We just want to share with you some of this fun stuff and the places that we're getting some of these cool seeds. Now, a lot of the seeds that we're going to be buying this year are actually going to come from our buddies over at Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. We're big fans, as you know. We've worked with Baker Creek on so many different projects before, so any chance that we have to support them with a seed purchase, I'm into it, because they have just got such a cool selection of different stuff.
Speaking of cool, we ordered this really cool lettuce called Ice Queen from Baker Creek.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice one because it's really been bred to handle the cool weathers of the Midwest, even more than most lettuces. So this is going to be a nice one, not only to plant this spring, but in particular in the fall when the frost comes.
I'm also ordering some interesting flowers that I've never grown before.
Yeah, we're also going to pick up a couple random veggies there. We're going to get some tomatillo, some cabbages, and turnips. And we're actually, it looks like on the list here, it says that we're getting some Buena Mulata hot pepper seeds, Heather.
Yeah, I thought it was a cool story. So I knew I didn't need any hot pepper seeds, but one just landed in the cart.
It's funny how that happens. I like this pepper, though. This is one years ago we actually grew it. Now, the Buena Mulata is a pepper that I actually talk about when I teach about seed saving, because, you harvest seeds from ripe peppers, and you could typically, with most pepper varieties, it's easy to identify a ripe pepper because it changes from green to a color, whether it's red or yellow or whatever the type of pepper is. But Buena Mulata is a variety that actually changes colors more than once. It starts purple, then it turns orange. That is, but it's not ripe yet. If you let it go longer, then it will turn a very deep, vibrant, beautiful red color.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they're awesome plants. They're very attractive.
So purple, orange, red.
Yeah. Okay, so Buena Mulata is a fun one. So that's cool that you got that. That's exciting. I see that we're also getting some seeds from Eden Brothers, which was a company we've actually never purchased from before.
Yeah, they said they were based out of North Carolina, and they offered a ton of different heirlooms and organic options, but they had some things that I couldn't find other places. And because of this big super secret project, I needed some interesting things like flaxseed and caraway seed, both of which I kind of struggled to find the thing I was looking for in other places. So Eden Brothers had that. I'm excited to try them out.
Yeah, I see we're also getting some amaranth and some bush lima beans. So this is an important thing, I guess we could say about this. When you're choosing the varieties or the species that you want to grow in your gardens, you got to be realistic about what's going to do well for you here. Southern pole style, pole habit lima bean might not have enough time to grow all the way full to a mature seed for us here in Michigan, right? But a bush variety lima bean has a shorter lifespan. You know, it's like a determinate plant, essentially. It's going to bush out, it's going to produce a flush for us, and we're going to be able to get those lima beans in plenty of time here in Michigan. So we got to choose varieties that are going to do well for the places that we're at. So we got to be realistic.
So because we're trying to get some seeds in here that we don't normally grow, like this lima bean and like a peanut, we were searching out ones that would work for us better. Like you said, the bush variety, but like the peanuts we ended up getting from someone in the Midwest.
John Shirk, actually, he used to run Shirk Seed Company. He's in Bristol, Indiana, northern Indiana. He grows an incredible amount of interesting stuff, including these northern adapted peanuts, which is really important for the project. So we had to get some of them. I just actually found out, you know, he'd closed his seed company last year, 2 years ago, whatever it might have been. And they just this year, so for the 2025 season, John Shirk's staple crops are going to be available for purchase through the Great Lakes Staple Seed Company.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes too, if folks want to check that out. If you live anywhere near us, this is going to be a great resource for you for things like wheat, rice, peanuts, these sorts of things. So he's growing some really cool stuff there.
Another company we're getting seeds from this year is Fedco Seeds.
Right. I bet our listeners are probably familiar with Fedco Seeds. They're big suppliers for a lot of small farmers. They're out of Maine. They've actually been around since 1978. So Fedco Seeds has been here even longer than me.
Wow.
So I know it's a long time.
Old.
Yeah. This is some cool stuff on the list that we're getting from Fedco, though, for sure.
Yeah. A chunk of this is things I need to take some photos of for this project. So I'm getting a bunch of different grains, ryegrass, winter wheat, barley, rice. So that'll be kind of cool to get a pile of those seeds in my possession and see how they all look compared to one another.
Yeah, it'll be nice to compare the different types of barley by each other, that sort of thing. That will be fun to look at. And Fedco, don't they offer seeds in larger quantities?
Yes.
More bulk seed, yeah.
Which was harder to find, which is why I went with this company.
Yeah, for sure. We're getting some potatoes, it looks like. Parsnips, turnip, and rutabaga. I'm stoked about the rutabaga. Everybody should grow rutabaga.
We're still looking for a couple things. We got to finish off our list before we press the buy now button. So we'll finish that up, get some, pick out a basil and pick out a spinach and proceed with those orders. So we want to get that order in right away so they can ship it to us over the next couple weeks. We'll get those seeds started in early to mid-March.
Absolutely. So for all of you listening, now is the time. The bells are ringing. Get out, get in your garden, make some plans, start dreaming, get those seeds, and get ready to get planting. Well, what do you know? Here we are at the end of yet another show together. Big thanks to Heather for hanging out with us today and to all of you for tuning in. Remember, if you enjoy the podcast, you can always show your support by joining our community on Patreon. You can find that link and so much more at seedsandweedspodcast.com. This episode was edited and produced by all of us here at Small House Farm, and the music we're listening to right now is a funky jazz big band by Nick Pankay. Thanks so much for tuning in, my friends. I'm Bevan Cohen, and we'll see you next time.